what happened was true. The most bizarre and brutal series of crimes in America. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. After you stop screaming, you'll start talking about it.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, first hitting the scenes in 1974, is, on the surface, a fairly simple horror story. A group of young people go out on a road trip but end up becoming the victims of a cannibalistic family. It's a trope that would be repeated in other films, each one spawning a pretty sizable franchise. But the original Texas Chainsaw stands out amongst the crowd, not just visually but also thematically. The movies are never made in a bubble disconnected from the world in which they're being released, and the turbulence of the early 1970s is seen in nearly every aspect of the film. So let's take some time and look at the film's depiction of the people of Muerto County. The ones that are left behind. Scene 3. Exterior. Day. The van is passing through a small town. The town has apparently seen better days. Much of the business district is boarded up, and a number of the residences are seemingly vacant. The tuning of the radio continues. This is how Kim Henkel and Tobe Hooper describe the fictional town of Newt, Texas, a town where most of the people are out of work, businesses are closed, and much of the town is empty. The radio broadcasts various tragedies in the area, including an oil fire at the Texas-Louisiana border. The robberies at the graveyard have gathered all the townsfolk together, and as the protagonists pull in, many of the older folks are lamenting the younger people, that, they were raised right, and that the younger folk are too coddled. It's no wonder this happened. Our time in the town is short, and after confirming that Sally and Franklin's grandfather's grave has not been vandalized, we carry on to the two characters that I really want to hone in on, the hitchhiker and the chef. After leaving Newt, we pass by a slaughterhouse, which Franklin talks at length to the others about how his grandfather sold cattle there, and then how the cows were killed.
Well, they don't do it like that anymore. Now they got this big air gun that shoots a bolt into their skull and then retracts it. It's just boom.
When the group passes by a hitchhiker and picks him up, we're treated to his view of the world.
That gun's no good.
I was in there once with my uncle.
No way. With a sledge. See, that was better. They died better that way.
How come? I thought the gun was better.
Oh, no. With the new way people put out of jobs.
Although he's clearly proud of his family's work and the sustainability of making sure nothing goes to waste, his main concern is placed squarely on labor. His family's always worked at the slaughterhouse, and in fact, the chef was the only one in the family that didn't work there, leaving them without jobs and leaving the chef as the sole income for the family. They're also not the only ones affected, as in the screenplay, Kirk says that it's just about the only place people can work in the area. And we don't get too much information out of the hitchhiker before he gets kicked out of the van, and we're introduced to the next character that I want to focus on, the chef. The chef's personality and quirks are much less pronounced than that of his brother, though they're much more apparent in the sequel. Unfortunately, we're just using context from the first film. The chef runs a gas station, an unfortunate position to be in with the oil fires that we heard about on the radio. When we're introduced to him, his station's run out of gas, so he tries to get the protagonist to stay in and get some food inside. When Franklin asks about his old grandfather's house, the chef's demeanor is abundantly different from the hitchhiker, giving warnings that they shouldn't snoop around other people's property, but when Franklin mentions that his father owns the land, we get a quick line, but one that speaks volumes about the relationship between our protagonist and the antagonists.
That's your daddy's place, huh?
Yeah.
Look,
We don't know anything about the lives of the protagonists, except what we're shown. A group of people in their early to mid-20s on a road trip as much of the world around them is decaying. As for Sally and Franklin, we can surmise they come from a decently wealthy family, as their grandfather was a cattle rancher and their father owns at the least 2 properties. This is the closest we get to a character acknowledging the divide between them, the working-class townsfolk and the free-spirited travelers. And later on in the film, after all of her friends have been killed and Sally runs to the gas station for help. We get another quick line from the chef.
Had to lock up and get the lights. Cost of electricity is enough to drive a man out of business.
No, this line is quick and it's really just a small joke. It clues us in into what he values as a character, his business and the security of his family. With his family and their skills left unneeded at the slaughterhouse, he's the sole breadwinner for the family. It's an ironic position since he's shown to be the only one unwilling to kill someone. In fact, at the infamous dinner scene, we get this line from the chef.
There's just some things you gotta do. Don't mean you have to like it.
Was this family always cannibals? Was there always this dark secret hiding just barely out of view? Or were they driven to cannibalism out of desperation? Their skills that they had were no longer necessary in the world. They talk so highly of how skilled Grandpa was, and the hitchhiker knows that he and Leatherface have some of those skills, and that the chef doesn't. Now, am I sitting here overanalyzing throwaway lines from a nearly 50-year-old movie? Probably. If Kim Henkel saw this video, he might just say that none of this makes sense and that none of these things were intentional. But harking back to what I said earlier, films aren't made in a vacuum. In the early 1970s saw the US going through the worst economic crisis since before World War II. By 1970, unemployment was at an all-time high at 33%. The Consumer Price Index increased by 11%. Prices were increasing while people were losing their jobs. And in 1973, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries placed an oil embargo on the US, causing the price of oil to skyrocket by almost 400%. Even after the embargo ended in 1974, just 7 months before the release of Texas Chainsaw, the price of oil was still 33% higher than it was before the embargo. And this is exactly the situation that we see in Texas Chainsaw. Unemployment is at an all-time high, gas shortages, and desperation is in every nook and cranny of Muerto County, the place where this carefree and young group met their end. The dead county.